Today is January 31st. We are in San Francisco. This is Church 1.0. We are in the second week of the Return of the Prodigal Son series, the story of homecoming. This is very nice. I just would like to invite you to close your eyes with me to start the second part. We thank you, God, for this wonderful opportunity to be here to discuss this great book and this great content. There is so much to talk about. There is so much we have been reading, and we are excited about this series. So please stay with us and help us leave this place better than we got here. We pray in your name. Amen. You know, I really quoting Greg, really want to encourage you to get the book and to read this book, because it for many reasons it sounds like a devotional. It's a small book, it's very easy reading, and it's so deep. It's hard to prepare the content because there are some pages I just noticed this morning that I looked at this page, and first I had highlighted this part, and then I had highlighted the other part, and then I had highlighted the other part. Now the whole page is highlighted. I think there is one phrase that is not. There is a lot of content, a lot of very good content, and if you read again, then you are always going to find a different shade, you are going to find a different perspective, and there is a lot to learn. And it is easy reading. So you have a lot to gain reading the book.
Alright, so we're going to start off this video with a quick quiz. This painting that we're looking at currently, which is The Return of the Prodigal Son by Rembrandt, would be associated with which artistic movement? And hopefully you're thinking right now, Baroque. Rembrandt was associated also with another movement that we refer to as the Dutch Golden Age, but that really did not typically include religious or historical themes. So this is a Baroque painting. It was actually mentioned in church last Sunday, which is why I chose it for this week's Painting of the Week. And it depicts the story of the prodigal son as told in the Gospel of Luke. And I'll talk a little bit about the story right now. The idea is that this is a parable that Jesus tells, and it's about a man, a wealthy man, who has two sons. And one of the sons says that he wants his inheritance, and then he wants to go off and live on his own. So his father gives him his inheritance, and the son squanders it, right? He wastes it on gambling and prostitutes, and he's completely destitute. He's working as a swineherd, and it says he looks even at the food that the pigs are eating, and he would long to just eat his fill of the pods on which the swine feed. But then it occurs to him that his father's servants have a pretty good life compared to the life that he's living now, right? He's basically starving to death, and he says, you know what, I'm just going to go back to my father, and I'm going to beg him. I'm going to say, Father, I'm not even worthy to be called your son anymore, but just treat me as you would one of your hired men so that I can live at home again and not die of starvation. And when the father sees his son coming back, he immediately takes him into his arms and he forgives him, and he's happy that he's home, and he gives this big celebration. But the father's other son, who never left home, who continued staying at home and working for his father, is kind of upset by this because unlike his brother, right, he had always been responsible, he had always respected his father, and his father never threw some big festival for him. But now his brother, of course, is returning home, and his father is overjoyed, and he's throwing a big party, and they're going to slaughter the fattened calf. And we can see the brother's hands here sort of folded in judgment against his brother. So the theme here is that of forgiveness, and I'm not going to talk too much about the deeper theological significance of this, although I think it's fairly obvious. Let's look more now specifically at this painting. So let's identify who we have here. We'll start out with the obvious people. So here's the prodigal son. He's resting his head against his father's chest. Can you find the boy's mother? She's hidden. She's back here in the shadows. You can just barely make out her silhouette. She's standing in the doorway right there. The other brother, the non-prodigal son, is this man right here. And we can identify him as his father's son because they're dressed similarly. They're both wearing this red cloak, which would have been indicative of their wealth. This man who's sitting here also appears to be fairly wealthy, based on his outfit. So maybe he was some associate of the father, like a tax collector, the estate developer or manager, something like that. And then this last boy that we can see sitting here, dressed quite a bit more plainly, and he looks to be a little bit younger than the rest of the people here, so he's probably a household servant. So the astute viewer will notice something interesting here. Rembrandt has painted the father with both a masculine hand, the left hand here on the right, so we can see how it's thicker, the features are more defined, a little bit more rugged looking, and then a feminine hand here on the left, the father's right hand, which has more gentle features, it looks smoother. So this is interesting from a theological perspective, because if we think of the Christian view of God as Jesus is representing him here in this Bible story, it's someone who is authoritative, someone who is worthy of fear, who commands respect, attributes that would have traditionally been associated with masculinity, but at the same time this God is merciful, he's compassionate, he's full of forgiveness, characteristics that we would traditionally associate with femininity. And this idea, of course, is not exclusive to Western religion. It is in many ways, I think, even more pronounced, more important in a lot of the Eastern religions, where we talk about this idea of yin and yang and masculine and feminine personality traits or characteristics, where the ideal individual is not someone who's fully on one side or the other, who's fully masculine or feminine, but embodies an appropriate blend of these two different flavors of character. And so it is also with God.
I think also interesting, I mentioned last week, it's interesting that the rough hand is the left hand, not the right one. So, because usually your rough hand is going to be the hand that you use the most, usually the right hand, but in this case, the rough hand is not the hand that you are extending to touch people. The hand that you usually touch and deal with people is the soft hand, not the rough hand. We have here, we talked more basically all the time last week about the picture itself, about the Hermitage Museum. When I heard about the picture, I thought it was a small picture like the Mona Lisa or something, larger than that, but not that huge. It's really, it's larger than life. It's a very, very long, very big picture. Last week we saw the text from Luke 15, 11 to 32. Last week we read from the New International Version, and today I brought the modern English version. It's slightly different, and I would like to go through that with you, verse per person. Manisha, could you start for us, please?
Then said, a man has two sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that falls to me. So he divided his estate between them.
Not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and journeyed to a distant country, and there squandered his possessions in prodigal living.
When he had spent everything, there came a severe famine in that country, and he began to be in want.
So he went and hired himself to a citizen of that county, who sent him into his fields to fed swine.
Listen.
He would gladly have filled his stomach with the husks that the swine were eating, but no one gave him any.
Right.
When he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have an abundance of bread, and here I am, perishing with hunger.
Will I arise and go to my father? I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you.
I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.
So he arose and came to his father. But while he was yet far away, his father saw him and was moved with compassion, and ran and embraced his neck and kissed him.
The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.
But the father said to his servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet.
Manish.
Bring here the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to be merry.
Now his older son was in the field. As he came and drew near the house, he heard music and dancing.
So he called one of the servants and asked what this meant.
He said to him, your brother has come and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he was received safe and sound.
He was angry. Sorry to let her go. He was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and entreated him.
But he answered his father, look, these many years have I served you, nor have I ever transgressed your commands. Yet never have you given me a goat, so that I might be merry with my friends.
But when the son of yours came, who has devoured your living with harlots, you killed a fattened calf for him.
He said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours.
But it was fitting to be merry and be glad, for this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.
Interesting. It's interesting to see, we are still in the first part, in the beginning of the book, the introduction and the presentation that's before chapter 1, and now it says, at the heart of this adventure is a 17th century painting and its artist, a 1st century parable and its author, and a 20th century person in search of life's meaning. So that's where we are. We are facing the picture and we are studying the parable in living in a different time. So that is this process and how we relate to that. How is that relevant for me? What can I learn from this? It's an interesting experience. A couple of questions for those who know. Where did Noah move from and to in order to have time for himself? Do you remember?
He was a very high professor somewhere?
Harvard.
And he moved to the mentally handicapped facility called Arch or something?
Larch. Yeah.
Is that what you were talking about?
Yes. So he was in Harvard for 20 years teaching, and he decided to move to France, to the Larch community, which is one of dozens of large centers around the world dealing with the handicapped. So, and it was a very interesting move for him because he was from being extremely prestigious and respected and recognized to go to a place where the people he was going to deal with had absolutely no knowledge of who he was and wouldn't care. Even if somebody told them, they would not understand what that meant and they wouldn't care for it. It's just this guy here. That's what we are seeing. Do you know how many times he spent, or you do guess, when he finally went to the Hermitage Museum, what was the amount of time he spent looking at the picture?
He spent the better part of the whole day.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how many hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's at least 6, if not more.
Mm-hmm. What is your guess? More or less?
More.
That is our full.
It was long enough to watch the light move over it. I remember that. It's the whole day.
It seems like there are 2 blocks of 2 hours. So there are 4 hours, but the most important part of the day. So he got there and in the morning, and then he had a break, and then he went back in the afternoon. So the light moving was very interesting. Eugene, would you read that for us, please?
I so much wanted to keep some control over my spiritual journey, to remain able to predict at least a part of the outcome, that relinquishing the security of the observer for the vulnerability of the returning son seemed close to impossible.
So he was talking about his journey. He was talking about the time that he he wanted to understand God's love, because he had been preaching God's love, he had been teaching God's love, he had a more theoretical understanding of God's love. But to get out of that spot, to be in the place of the prodigal son, what did that mean for him? What did that mean for him? Lisa?
The two women standing behind the father at different distances, the seated man staring into space and looking at no one in particular, and the tall man standing erect and looking critically at the event on the platform in front of him. They all represent different ways of not getting involved.
When I read this part, I was like, what do you mean different ways of not getting involved? It was more like, almost like, they're purposely hidden. I don't know if they, and part of it is like, because of that, what we talked about last week, which was that the real focus is the two sons, right, and the father.
Yeah.
But why did he even take the mom? You can't see it very well, So I feel like maybe he's making a commentary on who was allowed in the space of reunion and who wasn't. So, and then there's also like a female servant, right, between the two of them.
Yeah, that is one person here.
Yeah.
And there is another one here. In the replica, it's very hard to see the nuances. I don't know. Have you been there? You went there, Norma.
It's like that. It's hard to see.
It's hard to see.
It's just you almost ignore it until someone points it out and says, "Notice this person."
Oh, okay. I thought the original would be a little more clear than this. It's not. But it's interesting, and yeah, they are not allowed. Another way to see that is another way that can be perceived. That's the way that people were not directly involved for whatever reason. But
well, it almost makes it sound as like what he's saying that there's some consciousness.
Yeah.
Which we don't really know what they're thinking.
Yeah, he's tracing an analogy here, right? It's just for the sake of analogy. He's saying there are different ways of not getting involved for different reasons. We are not going to. So you may say, I was not allowed there. You may say, I'm not involved, or I'm not interested, or whatever role you are playing on that scene.
An artist draws something that is something he studied, or she, and comes to the point that this is what they're going to portray. So what Nouwen said was that yes, it was a first century story, but it was a whatever century artist who drew this and interpreted himself. And now as 20th century, how do we use the original biblical story and the painting to then inform us of what this story is telling us? And so it would be interesting to know. No, it wouldn't be. An artist doesn't necessarily want you to interpret it the way he interpreted it. He wants you to, or she wants you to look and say, what is this telling me? How am I informed? How does this broaden my understanding of what I see?
And in this picture, the picture says that, because in the picture you look at the people, they are not wearing clothes from the first century.
Right.
They are wearing contemporary clothes. So it's like the author is saying, this is how I see the picture, according to my lens, according to my view. That's how I see the story. So how do you see the story?
Well, I think what was really interesting last week that I didn't know we talked about was that in some ways Rembrandt's life is paralleling the prodigal son, so that he had been married to this rich woman, had this lavish lifestyle, and then lost everything after she died, and became kind of like, wasteful, prodigal, if you will, of things. And now he's coming back, and he wants to be accepted, right? So it's hard. I think Rembrandt's one of the hardest artists because he puts himself in his paintings all the time. So I don't know if that's because he's saying any man can be this person, or I, Rembrandt, am this person. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. But it was the last thing he worked on, right, before he died.
One of them. It was not even published. That was in his studio when he died. So you know, I think the thing here is the fact that with Nouwen or with Rembrandt, the thing is, what is your take? How do you feel about this experience of being in this relationship with God and being embraced by God and come back and feel at home? How significant is that for you? Roberto, can you read that for us, please?
There is indifference, curiosity, daydreaming, and attentive observation. There is staring, gazing, watching, and looking. There is standing in the background, leaning against an arch, sitting with arms crossed, and standing with arms gripping each other. Every one of these inner and outer postures is all too familiar to me. Some are more comfortable than others, but all of them are ways of not getting directly involved.
So that's what he meant before. He said, this is my experience. That's how I feel that I have been behaving during all this time. Not being really involved, not being really close to God, not being on the spot. Being talking about, being mentioning, being explaining, and you know, that I have assumed all these different postures, but I had not been really present there on the spot with God. Good. Did I pass through? Yeah. Okay. So again, the explanation of his personal journey. Eugene.
Moving from teaching university students to living with mentally handicapped people was, for me at least, a step toward the platform where the Father embraces his kneeling Son. It is the place of light, the place of truth, the place of love. It is the place where I so much want to be, and am so fearful of being.
The place of being completely embraced and completely loved. And he talks about the experience when he walks in this place, and this person, Linda, who is handicapped, she comes and she embraces him, she hugs him, and he doesn't know how to react to that because she's welcoming him. And he says, I don't know Linda. I didn't feel completely comfortable to be hugged by her. I'm sure she's hugging everyone here, but how am I going to react? She doesn't know who I am. And that's when he says, even if you explain, she's not going to care for that. That's not the point. The point is being there. The point is giving up all the prestige, the prestige that he has somewhere else and to be in that place.
I think what's interesting is, because I kind of fell into this trap for a long time in my journey, is this difference between sort of intellectualizing and symbolizing religion. And he must have given lectures thousands of times, right, on different parts of the Bible. And the difference between that and actually living that experience, and how much more wisdom actually comes from living the experience. And so it's almost like when Linda hugs him, she like, it doesn't matter who he is, she just sees that he's a soul, he's a human.
Yeah.
And she wants to connect with him and embrace him. So it's almost like, you know, he doesn't feel true to himself at that moment. So that's why that's how I figured he was saying, you know, I didn't know how to react, I didn't know what to do. It's like, you don't have to do anything, just be there.
Yes, just accept the love that's given. And he says, you know, I don't know if I'm coming to, I know that I'm not coming to this place is not about, going to this place is not about what I have to give to them, but it's more about what they have to give to me.
It is the place where I will receive all I desire, all that I ever hope for, all that I will ever need. But it is also the place where I have to let go of all I most want to hold on to. It is a place that confronts me with the fact that truly accepting love, forgiveness, and healing is often much harder than giving it. It is the place beyond earning, deserving, and rewarding. It is the place of surrender and complete trust.
And he's talking about this, but he's not talking about the large here, he's directly talking about this spot here. He's talking about being there, being on that platform with the Father. That's the place of accepting love, of accepting forgiveness, accepting healing, accepting everything that God wants to give. So he's talking about that specific spot there, specific place.
During my time here at Daybreak, I have been led to an inner place where I had not been before. It is a place within me where God has chosen to dwell. It is a place where I am held safe in the embrace of an all-loving Father who calls me by name and says, "You are my beloved Son. On you my favor rests." It is a place where I can taste the joy and peace that are not of this world.
I thought a lot about the language that we use here, because it's a very gender-specific language. And I also thought about, the more I look at the picture, the more I see a message that is inclusive there. I think the fact that the Father has a gentle hand and a very strong hand, and people have interpreted that as a female hand and a male hand. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that what is the language that works for me. I grew up without a father, so I transferred all the paternity stuff to God, and that helped me. And it took me more than 30 years to realize that my relationship with God as a father, it's just Marco's perspective. It's not a reality. It's not literal. It's the way that I see God, the way that I perceive God, and that works for me. But what works for you? What is the language that works for you? Because and then I also came to mind this week that although I had this image of my relationship with God, but that was never the Father's house for me. That was always the mother's house, and it's still the mother's house. Because I grew up without the father, so the house was not my father's house, was my mother's house. So going back home, or even going home spiritually, is not going home to my father's house, it's going home to my mother's house. It's how it smells, it's how it feels. It's about the seasoning of the food. It's about the feeling of being in that space. It's about how the place embraces me and comforts me and takes care of me. So it's the mother's house. And the question is, what is your language? What is the language that's going to be meaningful to you? And we don't need to switch from one to the other. We don't need to say it has to be the father's or the mother's house. It doesn't have to be feminine or masculine. It can be both. Because in fact, in the picture, we have both elements present there. And I think that's extremely relevant in terms of inclusiveness, how we are going to embrace, and there is a space for everyone in the spectrum.
It's interesting. When I read that, I didn't think about, I'm so used in Christianity to talking about the Father and the Son, that I didn't even think about it. But, for me it's interesting because I grew up in a religion, in Hinduism, where there is the God's Son. There are the most important gods have no gender. They're constantly switching forms. And so, I should say God, because there's one God in forms. But, and so it's kind of an interesting, this has always bothered me, this idea of like a father-son relationship. I don't know a lot of people that have great relationships with their father, at least I didn't, And so it creates this like weird distance for me. So for me, I had to make it really abstract and say the home inside me is like a place of wholeness. That's really how I see it. I see it literally like you sitting at a table in my mom's house, So I think, but that again also makes it harder to visualize what God looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to look at that and to see what's going to work for me and how this is going to work for me. Because the language we are used to, and this is a paternalistic society we are talking about. That's where to this society Jesus was talking. So how do you look at that today, and you make that, you bring the message, this message of love, of acceptance, and this message of love, of home. How do we as a community create a home that really makes everyone comfortable? that makes people feel I am this place and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how that's going to be, but it's comfortable for everybody.
I think what has struck me just now is there's so many people have this dissonance of father, son, what about mother, daughter, what about, whatever. And the fact that a 17th century artist put both the male and female there is pretty amazing for that time. Because they would have only thought of God as male. But for us now to say God is both male and female, and then our English language has really destroyed this idea that God is both male and female, is that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, definitely, especially because the women are not in the parable. You don't hear anything about women in the parable, but he depicts them there. And I think I mentioned that last week. The color red is very important on this picture. If you take the red, you're going to kill the whole picture. There is a lot of red there in many ways and all nuances. And if you're especially talking about the story from Jesus, story from that's depicting the story from the Bible. So you have the idea of the blood of Jesus. You have the idea of mercy. You have the idea of grace. If grace had a color, if mercy had a color in the Bible, that would be red for sure, because that's the color of blood. That's, according to the gospel, is the element that cleans, that saves, that brings the opportunity, that brings you back, that ties you with the family, all of that. So, and then tying that to what Norma just said, we have the woman here in the back, and I invite you to take a good look after that, on that afterwards. The woman has a necklace, and the necklace, there is a red pendant there. So, it's the same red that is in the father. And it's interesting because the red of the father robe is the same one that's covering even the older son, who has a very weird antagonistic attitude. But the same red is the same grace, same mercy that comes from the father, who is the owner of it all, is covering also the elderly son. And I think I was wondering, where did they take the idea from that the woman in the very back is the mother? And my conclusion is that because of the necklace and because of the pendant she's carrying. Because this other person here is closer, it would be easier to see if she had a necklace or something of that sort, but she doesn't. And the other one in the far back, you can see the necklace and the pendant.
I think on another level too, for me it kind of symbolizes the fact that the thing that we all so generously call truth is not always self-evident. Sometimes it's very obscure. You have to look for to actually see the true meaning.
Yeah, and I think that's the invitation that you have here, because you have all this dark area. So you really have to spend some time and to look for something, and you are going to see all these different nuances and figures that are there.
Why do you think the artist did that? Made it so hard to see the background people.
That was the way they were doing art at that time. So it is, interesting.
The whole focus was on God and the returning son, I guess.
But it's like you said, Norma, it would have been like revolutionary to have a woman in the picture, but then if you're going to do it, why not do it openly? Like, I don't really, you know what I mean? And so it's strange. It's like they're there, but they're not really there. They're not participating in the
Well, they are not in the parable, so I know what you're saying, but I'm saying what I am seeing is that he's bringing the women to the story, to the picture. So that's kind of extrapolating the interpretation already, because they don't show up in the parable at all.
You ran out of time. That's why they're
here. Yeah, no, but I'm not justifying the absence of them. I'm just saying. Anyway, Maureen, can you read that for us?
This place had always been there. I had always been aware of it as a source of grace, but I had not been able to enter it and truly live there. Jesus says, anyone who loves me will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we shall come to him and make our home in him. These words have always impressed me deeply. I am God's home.
So that's where we stopped last week, right? I am God's home. So this for me was very interesting. You haven't even properly started the book yet, and he's already impressing me so much, because what he says is that, you know, this platform here, the place where God is, the place of the love, where the light spot is, and where I can find God, that's inside me. And that's what Jesus said, you know. Anyone who keeps me will keep my word, and my Father will love him and shall come to him and make our home where? In him, inside of him. So I am God's home.
But it has always been very hard to experience the truth of these words. Yes, God dwells in my innermost being, but how could I accept Jesus' call? Make your home in me as I make mine in you. The invitation is clear and unambiguous, to make my home where God has made his. This is the great spiritual challenge. It seemed an impossible task.
That means that I have been through my whole life trying to find God's home. Where is God's home? And then you go to this place, you go to that place, where is God's home? Or you want to make God's home here, want to make God's home there. And when he's saying is that to make my home, in order to make my home where God's home is, I need to feel comfortable within myself. I need to find comfort and to feel okay with my own heart, with my own mind, with the core of myself where God is. So God is there. Do you ever felt that you are very disconnected from everything, including from yourself? You know, something's going on and you feel completely far away from anything and everything. Those circumstances when if somebody would ask you, what are you feeling? And you'd say, I don't know. I feel numb. I feel disconnected. And the process here is exactly the opposite, is to find ways to be always in contact with this core that we have, this platform that we have where the father or the mother is meeting the son or the daughter, to be in that spot of love, of care, of compassion, of everything, where that connection is above anything and everything. That's why I am still attached to Christianity, because for me it's a language that tells me a lot about love. You know, it's this connection that I have with my children. That, you know, doesn't matter what they do, doesn't matter where they go. I was talking to them. We went to I think this is a too long digress, but I'm going to try to bring it back. I was going out with Amanda and I said, you should, on this society here, you need to be very careful the way you are dressing, because you are calling for too much attention. And she was complaining and we were kidding about that. I was being careful about what I was saying and the way I was saying, and I said to her, I wish I had a very ugly daughter, so that would not be a problem and nobody would look at you. What I'm saying is that, you know, don't love your children because they are pretty, don't love your children because they are ugly, you don't love them because of anything. The main reason you love them is because they are yours. And for you, they are above anybody in the world. Anyone. There is no one that can compare to that. So that kind of relationship that I think that mirrors the relationship that God has with us. That's above, that has nothing to do what we did or what we didn't do. So that love that empowers, that cares for, that brings courage, that tells you no matter what, I'm going to be there. That's the spot. And the spot, what now I'm saying, and I think it's marvelous, is that it's not outside of me, it's inside of me. It's in the core of who I am. Anyone else? Daughter Brent.
With my thoughts, feelings, emotions, and passions, I was constantly away from the place where God had chosen to make me home. God himself showed me the way. The emotional and physical crises that interrupted my busy life at daybreak compelled me, with violent force, to return home and to look for God where God can be found, in my own inner sanctuary.
So that was the experience of him, to leave that place and to go, to leave the spotlight and to go somewhere where he could spend time with himself, where he could look inside and see and find that spot, that platform where the father is meeting the prodigal son. So you were going to say?
No, yeah, as you're thinking, I'm trying to think of all the different ways that this could be meaningful for me. And one of the things that, to me, that stands out is that I was just looking at Luke 15, what the story is.
Yeah.
And part of what you see is the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin and the lost son.
Yeah.
And part of me that I see is that the story is progressive and that there's an active God there all the time.
A search.
The one that's always absent is the human being, right? So we're always looking for stuff. Part of the Christian tradition has always been that you look for God somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But we don't always recognize that God is always with us and in us. And I think that's part of the interesting struggle that you see here. And I remember many, many years ago when I remember that I wrote this paper when I was in my second year, and it was an English class. And it was on Indians, and it was on Native Americans, and specifically Navajos. But one of the things that they always said was the Great Spirit is always everywhere, and was with us all the time. And that was always a contrast with Christianity, because Christianity taught us that God is out there and trying to reach us, and we're the ones that walk away. So there was always that contrast, and it took me years to try to reconcile that and understand what was going on. And that's what this particular picture shows, that God is there. You know, the parents are always there. You're always going to have a parent. And no matter how much we hate our parents or not like our parents or love our parents, like you're saying, parents are always going to be parents, right? We have just have to live with that and recognize that. How we interpret that would be different, but we could always see that God is always with us, is always with us. As parents, we're always thinking about the kids, right? No matter how much little the kids are thinking about us, right? Or, think about, in this case, what I was thinking and going beyond the picture is that prodigal son is going to be a parent someday. How are they going to be? Are they going to be imitating their father? Or are they going to be imitating their young self? How is it? I mean, that's an open question, right?
That's another fascinating thing about the book, because he discusses the roles and he goes through the roles. So one time I'm this person, the other time I'm that person, the other time I'm this person. So how do we see? And that's why I brought up all this quotes that I brought in the beginning about the active participation or not, because you are the picture. So who am I in the picture today? Because that varies. We take different roles, different days, but we are always there. A Norma and Manisha.
Well, this has all been going through my mind. Having read Soulful Spirituality and the Spirituality of Imperfection, etc., we come to the point where we understand we are spiritual beings on a human journey.
Right.
And for me to see that Nowlan was struggling, it seems like, to know where God could be found, is that in contrast to what we were saying we're spiritual beings, or he didn't understand that, or is this just a confirmation of what we were studying before? The reason I asked that is because I was on a retreat with just another friend a week or so ago, and she's always searching for God, and my response is always, I'm a spiritual being. I'm with God right now. I don't have to search. I'm not troubled. And then I began to think, maybe that's very self-centered, that you're not struggling or searching like Nowlan is. I don't know. Where is that happy point, or is it different for each one of us? I just kind of reacted to her always trying to search and find out, how do other people find God? And yet she's a very spiritual being, very caring, very compassionate person. So
my understanding, my perception, my take on this, on his experience is that it's not that he didn't know, or not that he was not spiritual, because he was always religious and always involved, and he was not a shallow person. That was the opposite of that. But that was the difference between talking a lot about that and really feeling loved. The really deep, personal, individual experience with God. And what came to me was my experience about living in a denomination and being here. So I wonder if I was there, maybe it would be harder for me to find the relationship with God that now I have. Because, a lot of suffering, a lot of loss, and a lot of everything. But finally, to be able to see that the platform is there, here inside. The platform was built. God already built a platform inside of me, not only me, but everyone. An inner place where we can find God with open arms, wanting to embrace and to accept us. So I think for him was not the intellectual part, it was the experimental one. It was more, how am I going to, I have to actively stop doing this and to give time to experience that. So that was the shift that I understand. Manisha?
So last week you talked about this like concentric circle idea.
That's the next slide.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, I will say that for me, seeing through those layers that we talk about and getting to that perfect circle inside, that core, that openness, that love, what you want to call it, God.
Yeah.
I had to strip away all these layers.
Yes.
And one of the things that helped me do that, ironically, was having a personal crisis. You know? In some ways, all these things that you may have told yourself and protected yourself with are lost.
Yes.
You lose somebody you love, like, for example. All of a sudden, you're like, who am I? Like, what relation am I to the universe now? How do I make my life work now? So I think what he's saying is very brave. But it just reminds me a lot of what we used to do at Second Wind, where we talk about the reason he was so powerful, I feel like, as a teacher, was that he had been through his own crisis and his own healing and redemption. And so, in some ways, I can totally relate to that.
Yes. Thank you.
I think part of the struggle, too, is I think probably each one of us in our own way has been involved in the search that we're talking about. And maybe one of the reasons that the search seems to be unsuccessful is that the focus has been externally. That if I search long enough and hard enough out there somewhere, I will find what it is I'm looking for. When the search really needs to be directed in.
Yes. So thanks a lot, Manisha and Eugene, because there was a great intro to the next part and the one we discussed next week. So you think about these three dimensions that we have inside, and this is the way that I describe them. Number one, the facade. Number two, the house, and number three, the home. So what is the facade? The facade is what people see and what they think you are, right? The facade is what I show. Is the persona. Is what Jung used to call the persona. And Jungian psychology says that the persona is the mask or facade presented to satisfy the demands of a situation or the environment. It is the mechanism that conceals a person's true thoughts or feelings, especially in adaptation to the outside world. So it's not fake, it's not bad, it's not that I'm concealing my thoughts because, I don't wanna hear everything you think about me all the time. Please don't let me know. Please filter that. Please shape that. So that's what we do. It's not being false. It's not being a person, a deceiving person. It's not about that. So it's not negative. Jung says that a strong ego relates to the outside world through a flexible persona. So that's the person we want to show. you comb your hair, you put nice clothes, you took a shower, you took care of yourself, you wanted to present yourself in a certain way. So that's the persona, that's the facade, that's the number one. So number two is the house. So the house, I'm saying that the house is what you think. It's who you think you are. It's your internal world. The house is the CEO of your life. It's the BZU. It is the control tower of your life. And this part can be shaped by experience, can be susceptible, can be impressionable, influenced, stimulated, or discouraged. It's the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, the daughter, the son, the student, the professional, the roles. So that's me. And that's where usually I spend most of my time. So that's, where everything happens, that's where I take care of everything. So that's not the part that I share necessarily with you. You can see part of that, but that's not, the closer you get, the more you see about this part of me, but that's not the facade. That's not what I show to everyone all the time. And then the home. The home is the deepest part spiritually. That's what God created you and me to be. That's what you are in your core. So the home is the center of your inner self. The home is the true 100% pure original you. It is the core of your person. It's what now it says that the heart is the place where you are most human. So you cannot be bad there. You cannot do anything wrong. You cannot mess up that place. It's always going to be there, because that's the core, the spiritual core of you. That's where your human DNA is, as I mentioned last week. That's where your wisdom lives. That's where the gut feelings come from. That's where the mother's intuition lives. That's the holy of holies of your person, where all the richness of your unique humanness abides. That's where your spiritual DNA is, and where you have the full potential to thrive. So if you think about God planning your life and who you could be, reaching everything you could reach, that's what it is. It is still there. It's in your core. And that's the platform that now is talking about, that Rembrandt, the picture. That's where God lives, is that core. So we have the facade, what people see and what they think you are. You have the house, you think you are, and you have the home, what God created you to be, and what you are in your core. But how do you leave that? We may leave it like this, have a large facade protecting everything. Most of the time, is a large house, very large space here where we are doing things, we are working, we are planning, we are paying bills, we are taking care of things, we have all our social life over there, and then we have a small core, a small spiritual core. It can be more than that. We can be busier in the core, and it can be very, very small. It can be smaller than that. So you are very busy, you have tons of things to do, so you have the facade and you don't have time for anything else. And I think, according to, that's my interpretation, that Nauen was running away from this, was running away from a life in which we are very busy. It doesn't matter that the issue. I can be talking about theology, I can be teaching about God, but I don't have time for that inner space.
I was going to say, he talks about it in the sense of things you're doing, but I really think about that white space as my own self-perception of myself. So emotions are there, guilt is there,
yes.
Feelings of sin, I don't know. Everything that you have kind of been told or that your subconscious took in and said to you, this is me, right? Yeah. And so the problem with that is it's all perceptual.
It is perceptual.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think once you get past that layer of I'm busy all the time, you just stop for a second, right? And be present, then you still have all of that whole internal narrative created by yourself, who you are, what you can do.
Yeah.
And so I think, you're right. I mean, to me, the goal of life is to get from the outside of the white to the blue.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I do that for me is meditation and other spiritual practices.
Yeah.
So the point is, it takes work.
It does.
To peel all these layers across.
Yes. Thank you very much, because that's why I said this area can be molded. That's why I said that the house is a part of us that can be impressed by things. So it may be a trauma, maybe a loss, maybe the way that you were raised that was not as perfect as mine was. It can be something that happened, or messages that you got. Maybe the message was not sent, but the message that you got saying that you were not that good. So that's the part that's the layer that can be tinted. It can be spotted with things that are not necessarily good. But there is a core that remains there. There is a third part that remains there. Another way to live would be like this. So you have, the spiritual core is very small, and you have a very active internal, but then the facade is huge. So there is a lot of time just trying to impress. There is a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy trying to show something. Doesn't matter if it's real or not, but you have to impress, you have to make a big impact.
I think that could also be the opposite as well, is having that facade, because you don't want to let people in your inner selves.
Yes.
So I think it works both ways.
Right, yeah. That can be in many ways, that can go, exactly, that can be interpreted in many ways. So you have, large facade. Is this one possible?
That would be nice. I mean, is this where monks are? I don't know. Because for me, I was thinking about Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist monk, and what he says that is so important for my practical kind of spirituality is that, we can all be somewhere peaceful and quiet and beautiful, where there are nothing to do, nothing to worry about, people don't judge us, and feel a sense of home, right? The hard part is doing that in a world that is always trying to define you and telling you messages that are not real. So for me, the key of this is actually understanding my true mind, like understanding what is the essential core of me, right? Everything else is stripped away. I have nothing, that core. And so, I've always thought, like, maybe this sounds awesome, but I just think that in society, that white part is constantly getting bigger. And part of our goal as human beings is to stop that and dive deeper and get to that spot.
So this is what brings us here, right? This is what brings us together, because I want to know what you have done. I want to know what works for you, because probably that works for me as well. A lot of the messages that we received in the white area are common, and that's what bringing us together. There are lots of things that we had to deconstruct. There are lots of things that we agreed that were not really helpful, and we want to get rid of them. We are working together. We want to invest on this area. We want to have this area in our lives as large as possible, because there we are going to hear more of who we intrinsically are. We are going to respect each other more. We are going to deal better with ourselves. We are going to be more compassionate, starting with ourselves and then with the others. Just imagine if we recognize that every person has a core that's created by God, that every person inside of them have this holy of the holies, has this space where God abides. How differently we would treat the other, instead of us and them, instead of looking at the color of their skin, instead of looking at their pocket, instead of looking at asking them which church do you go to, or what God are you worshiping, or anything, but just knowing that we human beings are the most human in our core, and in that core God abides. How differently we would treat each other, and how much more we would gain from this experience.
With this, this is what I picture, like your more enlightened spiritual people like Dalai Lama or Desmond Tutu having more of this configuration.
That's where Nowlan found home.
Yes.
It could be that his teaching was all this big, thick facade, and he didn't feel that was not what he wanted. And finding his true home
Yes.
was
Absolutely. Eugene and Minish.
One thing really important to me in the concept of my blue area is the fact that it's less about the size of it and more about the quality of it. So there's quality of the highest degree, no matter the size of the core.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing about this is you can fake it.
You can have a huge facade and be totally empty.
Yeah, yeah. You know about the blue area. The blue area is so it's very real. It's who you are. You cannot fake it. You cannot lie to it. You cannot make it up. It is what it is, and that's what it's going to be.
I think about like when Linda embraces him, she sees that, right? He doesn't see this yet. He doesn't see that he is this. He, you know, in some ways he thinks he's like a poser, right? He went through these steps, and why isn't he fulfilled? So I think that's part of what community is. You know, we all have times where the blue spot seems like you can't see it at all, and part of it is to have other people acknowledge who we really are.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. When I first saw Rembrandt's painting, I was not as familiar with the home of God within me as I am now. Nevertheless, my intense response to the Father's embrace of His Son told me that I was desperately searching for that inner place where I too could be held as safely as the young man in the painting. I was just thinking how much this idea, my concept of this parable has changed. My concept of what I've heard before about this story, and how many nuances this story can bring to me. What it was before, and how I was seeing this story before, and how I can see this story now. How much richer how much more that we can see, and how much richer this experience can be, looking at the parable.
In my journey, like this parable fits, my journey home, to my home, I have to remember that when I get there, that I have to be able to hold myself. If I'm arriving there waiting for me to be held by someone else, that's not going to work for me. I have to be completely at home with myself, able to comfort myself, hold myself. Maybe someone will hold me too, with a mother and a father hand. But I have to be able to be completely available to myself in order to come home all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. It is exactly that. It's the capacity of taking care of myself while you're embracing. It's how and he talks about this in this first and this initial part of the book. He says, you know, I came to terms with the fact that I am also the father, so I am the one embracing. If at one point I was the one coming home, and the other point I am the one embracing. I am the one extending compassion and extending love. And to whom am I going to be extending compassion in the first place? To myself. That's the one I'm going to be embracing and accepting in a level that has nothing to do with things that are done or not done, but just with the fact that we are God's children. Let's pray. We thank you very much, dear God, for finding you, for feeling your presence. And we ask you to be with us and to help us to see you in each other, to see you in ourselves, and to feed this kind of experience every day, so we may find peace, we may find compassion, we may find love, we may find the strength that you need to go through life every day. And we have that so abundantly that we can share that with those around us. Stay with us and guide us on this journey. We pray in your name. Amen.